So let me explain in a way here. Structured communication comes in two primary flavors, top-down or bottom-up, and each has its own purposes and to convey information. Top-down communication for us here today does not mean the C-level, the CEO, talking to the rest of the organization, right? So a top-down order or request. It's about the pyramid principle, starting with the key message, what really matters, what we say the so what for your message, and then talking about the details if necessary. Top-down communication was perfected by strategy consultants because they had to talk to the C-level, who is very busy and has to deal with a lot of topics. So not a surprise that it was an ex-strategy consultant who wrote the book Pyramid Principle, right? Many of you know who that is, Barbara Minto. And the thing is, you really need to think clearly to be able to communicate top-down. And we're going to talk more about this today. Now, bottom-up communication, it's also can be also structured, and it's ideal for situations when top-down communication is not so appropriate. What do you think those are? Like, if I would ask you, what could be good use cases for bottom-up communication? If you want to raise your hand or use the chat.
Bottom-up communication could be all the people should be encouraged to ask their queries and all that, and clarify their doubts. And if their doubts are clarified, they will definitely be encouraged and do the job.
Not exactly. I disagree. I don't think it's about clarification, because you can have clarification both in top-down and bottom-up. Let's see here in the comments. Sensitive topics. Dealing with an emergency. Well, it depends, right? So because you can say that emergencies are very good fit for top-down communication, because then you get the message across faster. For instance, the house is on fire, instead of saying like, I was cooking and then I made a mistake and now the house is on fire. So I think there's some urgency. Sharing bad news. Personal concerns. It depends. Very well. Okay, so I agree with you. There are some other use cases as well, right? So bad news for sure. If your conclusion is bad news for the listener, you can try to lead them more gently to the conclusion, right? You can try to prepare them to avoid shocking them with the bad news up front or in a top-down manner. And this is valid for personal news, but also business news, right? Sometimes you want to lead the person more gently to the conclusion. The other use case, which is probably the most common one in business, is to convince skeptical audiences, right? And here we talk about hostile audiences. It's not that they are evil or angry. Hostile means someone who has a point of view that is very different from what you're trying to persuade them of, right? It's very important that you choose the right method of communication, because top-down might make them shut down for what you have to say. So you might want to start with the bottom up, with the arguments, with the process, with the lead them to the conclusion more gently as well, right? So that's a very common use case. And finally, to create anticipation and evoke emotions. Not really common in business settings, maybe marketing, yes, but when you're talking about a story or you're talking to your friends and you want to engage them, make them pay attention, you probably don't start with the end of the story, right? So movies and books, they never will be top down, right? So you don't start with like, and then Voldemort gets destroyed or killed by Harry Potter. Let me tell you how this happened. So this is not the way it works. So sometimes you need bottom-up communication, but it's important that you know why you're using it, because the default in business should be top-down in most cases. Okay. As I said, yeah, great. I was going to say about questions, and I received one from Anya. Thank you. When I have to make someone redundant, is it bad news, but also bottom up? Okay, good question. I sometimes have to do it myself as well, and I usually try to not surprise people. right, completely, with like calling them for a meeting and then giving them a top down, like, I have to let you go. I try to prepare them for the call. I kind of give a hint of what the call is about in the message. And then during the call, I try to be more bottom up personally, right? Before the conclusion, I try to show them what is my reasons behind before making the decision. Okay, but maybe someone wants to share a different approach that you have used in the past as well. Okay, it's never a pleasant conversation, but it always comes up, right? So
I can tell you one coming from recruiting a lot. There you have tons of candidates in consultancies that get rejected. So the majority gets rejected. Actually, it's a lot more frequent that people get rejected, and some people also make it in the offering. For the rejections, what we always did was to say, look, this time it didn't work for you. And then we're giving the reasons because they were really craving for a decision, basically. They wanted to know it.
Yeah.
But for the guys that actually made it, you did not do it top down, but bottom up to really basically make them even more excited. Did I make it? Did I not make it? Is he now saying, it was a really good case, but there were also some troubles, but this exercise you did really well, and finally you come up with the offer, so they're really, really excited.
Nice, very nice. Yeah, good example, Christian, of deliberate use of top down versus bottom up, right? So we're not saying that one is good and one is bad, but we are saying like know that you're using it and know deliberately, right? What's the reason why you're using it? Very good example. Thank you for sharing. Now, a question.
I want to tell that supposing somebody is very weak on the bottom down, then he should be encouraged to come up, and so that he also becomes the best. So that is, I think, the best idea of the top to bottom communication.
Yeah, good. So let's continue. Now, in many instances, including my personal experience as an instructor, right? Sometimes we ask questions and we don't have a top-down answer ready yet. So it's a difficult question, complex, or something you haven't thought about, and it's hard for you to be top-down and to start with the so what or conclusion if you haven't done it in your head first. And my suggestion here when this happens is to first say that you are thinking out loud, right? So that people are prepared for a less top-down or less structured, even sometimes, answer. Second, when you finish your reasoning, because if you're trying to elaborate and at the same time you're thinking, one favor you can do for the audience is to finish and then recap the essence of what you said in a top-down manner, right? In a synthetic manner, and just package what the listener should take home from what you thought about, right? Recap and synthesize your own thoughts in a top-down manner after you've done the out loud thinking. Okay, and then you can mention like what are the open questions or the next actions to take about this. All right, let's explore a bit more in detail top down, because it's, as I said, the default option that we should use in business. And listen to this. Does this sound familiar? Someone comes and says, in recent weeks, our team has dedicated substantial efforts in this initiative. Initially, we consulted with Jamie from the research department to gather comprehensive industry insights. We analyzed the data. It became evident that the insights from the customer engagement surveys are more indicative of the trends. And incorporating the latest survey findings and correlating them with the market simulations, we managed to construct a detailed picture of potential growth areas. Presently, it appears that the technological sector in Germany presents a promising opportunity for us, although the analysis is ongoing and subject to refinement. So, typical communication that we want to avoid in business, which is bottom up with the process leading to the conclusion at the end, right? So that's exactly what we're trying to change in organizations, is to make it more top-down conclusion first. You start with, we have a promising opportunity in Germany, although the analysis is ongoing and subject to further refinement. I can tell the details about what we've done if you're interested, right? Also giving the choice to the listener if they want to double click on something, okay? In essence, top-down communication requires conscious effort, right? It's very important. Now, to represent it graphically, you start with your key takeaway, you select your arguments, and sometimes you go to a third level to use data to support the arguments of what you're trying to say, right? Sometimes it's an email, it might be a presentation, it might be a progress report or a verbal delivery, and then you have to adjust the level of detail to the situation. Now, a lot of people ask me this question here. Is the pyramid principle the same as problem structuring? Because you see, when we break down problems, you usually use this kind of issue trees as well. And it's not actually the same. Because when you're structuring a problem, you're typically doing analysis. You're breaking things down, right? And you have an issue, you break it down the first level component, right? Or process, and then second level, etc., etc. But the pyramid principle is about synthesis. It's about putting things together, but using only selected elements to build the pyramid. So it's not the same thing, right? One, you're trying to be exhaustive, the famous MISI. And in the other one, you are being selective and taking into consideration only what matters, because people's attention is limited. And also you might not have like 10 arguments that have the same importance. You might want to bring the 3 most important ones, which is the magical number, right? And the second question that I get a lot is, what if you're presenting and the audience needs more context before the top-down answer? We already touched upon this on the email. The solution here that we use a lot for in consulting and in business is the SCQ framework, right? Situation, complication, question, before you give the top-down answer. And then you give your reasons and then supporting facts. What is this SCQ thing? Well, the situation starts with a typical recognized stable situation, something that people accept. What is the what, where, when of a situation? Like our business is going to enter this new market by Q2, and the whole organization is geared towards that. The complication is something that, of course, makes it challenging. Something has changed, something's changing or will change. We have to do something, provoke this change, right? It has to come from us. Or there are different points of view on something, so there's disagreement and misalignment. Any other complication here can appear. And then the question is, what do we do normally, right? Or how do we address that? So in this case of this market entry example, well, maybe the sales department said we're not ready for Q2. We have to postpone to Q3, and the rest of the organization was ready for Q2. What should we do, right? So that's an example. I want to make a distinction between being top-down, using the SCQ, and being bottom-up, so that it's clear to everybody as well here. So being top-down is conclusion first, premises next, right? Or process, the process or the details. So we must fix the client's financial model ourselves. If you come with this news, people will understand very quickly, and then you can say why, because the model is broken, the client cannot fix it, we have no other feasible solution. Now, the SCQ is to avoid that you confuse your audience for being too upfront, because the context might not be so fresh in your audience's mind as it is in yours. So sometimes you just spoke about this topic yesterday or earlier this morning, so it's fine. But sometimes it's been few days or weeks or months, and you don't want to, instead of creating clarity, create confusion in people. So that's when you have to use the SCQ. So remember, we need the output of the client's financial data model for our market analysis. Time is short, this complication. So we must fix the client's financial model ourselves and the reasons behind, like beneath it. Okay, so it's a bit of context. It's not being bottom up. A lot of our students mix up like, you're being bottom up. No, you are putting people on the same page efficiently, right? Being bottom up would be like, hey, I have to tell you something. The model is broken. The client cannot fix it. There are no feasible ways, blah, 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 blah. And then the so what, right? We have to fix it, right? Usually missing the context, and here it's unnecessary to go into the details too early. Okay, so my recommendation for you is consider giving this brief SEQ to the audience before delivering top-down answer, and be short, but be short, because otherwise you might be perceived as a bottom-up communicator. The more you can do this, the faster you get your points across, right? If you're talking on the phone, on a call, if you're writing an email, if you are meeting someone in the corridor to update them, or presenting to a client, and so on, using the SEQ succinctly and then the top-down answer is usually a very good choice. All right, so any questions? I see the question about the slides, but the recording will be available. Yes.
There was one, Flavio, also from JMS. Have you heard about 5-sentence email?
No, I haven't, but I can imagine it's kind of like to limit your email to 5 sentences. Is that it? Maybe you can share with us what it is, or a link or something that we can learn. Would be great. One thing I definitely recommend about keeping emails short, like everybody likes short emails to receive at least, is to always separate the topics, right? Never bring in, never think like, oh, let me send you one email because it's easier to understand or easier to manage, let's say. It's not easier to understand. It's better to send separate emails for completely different topics, so that because the threads will develop in different directions. And if you have to answer point number 1, point number 2, and then point number 1, point number 2, it gets confusing and people tend to lose the thread, right? So use email as if we use Slack or any thread-based communication tools by having one topic for each email in the subject. It's easy to manage, and you can tell people like, I'm going to send you a separate email about this, and then send another one. Now, let's take a look at a quick good email, again, just to cement and finalize this topic. So here is a chatbot initiative email. So good subject line, approval required. So sharing the context, including the call to action to incentivize a faster response, like we spoke. And here I usually say, if you have a deadline that is shorter than 48 or even 72 hours, add it to the subject line, because people will appreciate that. If they have a lot of things to click on and choose from their inbox, they will tend to click on the ones that have a deadline in hours or days more than. Don't depend on them opening the email to find out that this email has to be answered in 48 hours, right? Second, here sharing the SEQ, right? As you requested, I'm writing to elaborate, and a highlight always helps read faster with a top-down approach. And then the reasons, here I really like something that ChatGPT uses a lot, which is this first word, like I call it headlining. So try to use 1 or 2 words in every bullet you write in the beginning of it, because the reader is gonna get it much faster. Financials, then I almost like it's prompting engineering for humans. I gear my brain towards thinking about financials when I'm reading that. So in the end of the day, we're also working a little bit like ChatGPT. So if you prompt people the best way, you get a better, faster response. And then we have here, important point, right? Counter premises. Being top down includes being succinct, but you should not avoid or giving risks or sharing the risks or the problems or the counter premises with your reader, because that's intellectually honest, right? So it's not because with this excuse of being succinct, I didn't mention that something really bad could happen, and indeed happened. So always try to be, as much as possible, clear about the risks, about the counter premises, or maybe evidence that is contrary to what you're saying. it earns you brownie points for sure for being intellectually honest. And finally, here is like more relationship building and so on. You can use that with colleagues and clients. So to summarize, structured communication, consider starting with a succinct SCQ. Know the reader, of course, like the audience and so on. Choose the top-down and bottom-up approach according to what you want to achieve, right? If they are very skeptical, maybe consider bottom-up, and maybe consider not even writing an email. It's easier to persuade people face-to-face, right? Or to see their reaction, and that rather than writing a very controversial email. Organize and number your reasons and premises. We did that a lot, right? Logically, what belongs to what, and prioritize your points.